Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? If so, consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have a weird and kind of creepy glitch story that may be a case of quantum immortality. I'm really not sure. I can't say that I know a whole lot about simulation theory or glitches, and I know even less about what quantum immortality really entails, but I think that this falls into that category. In order to fully make sense of it all, I guess I need to explain what happened. This is not a situation that happened to me personally. It actually happened to my brother, and I'm a bit of a side victim to the situation. This is going to be a bit weird in structure, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not really sure how to explain it all in a proper timeline, because the situation that caused it all happened about 5 years ago, and then I learned that the thing happened this past month. And now I'm questioning everything from that moment forward. So, on that, 5 years ago there was a major incident in our family home. I was 16 at the time, and my brother was about to turn 18. It was the middle of winter, and it was getting pretty cold here in the Midwest. We had the heat on in the house, but my brother's room was in a separate room off to the side of the basement. The room was once a laundry room, but my dad had changed all of the hookups, so he had taken that room as his. Unfortunately, the basement did have issues with heat, so my brother had bought a small room heater to set up down there to keep it all as warm as the rest of the house. On the night that this happened, my brother had left his space heater on, and I don't really know if it was a short in the plug or the heater itself, but it ended up catching on fire. Now, I want to mention that I do not remember much about this night, beyond the house catching, me getting out, and the insanity and chaos that took place as the fire department put out the fire. I will say that while I don't remember much, there is one very specific detail that I don't recall anything about, and that is my brother. I don't remember him exiting the house, and I don't recall him ever being pulled out of the fire by anyone else. For some reason, his whereabouts after the fire started, for me, are completely unknown. I will say that I do remember him being home that evening, because he was there for dinner. We'd had pizza and he asked Dad to get wings for him, which he did. I don't know why I recall that specifically, but I do. But for some reason, I have zero knowledge, memory, or idea where he was after the fire started. On the other end of this is my brother and what he remembers. He says that he remembers being home that night, and surprisingly, he said that he remembers the fire. He said that he was in bed and he remembers a weird popping sound that actually made him jump out of bed. Then, he recalls the room getting really hot and smoky. He said that he tried to get out of the laundry room but couldn't because the fire was blocking him in. With how that laundry room was built, there were no windows or exits outside of the main door, and there was a decent amount of basement that existed between the laundry room and the stairs. Thinking about it, the old laundry room really should not have been used as a bedroom, but hindsight is 20/20. The whole thing that he told me sounds horrible. He mentioned that he remembered starting to lose consciousness because of the smoke and heat, and that he tried as hard as he possibly could to get through the fire, but he remembers being horribly burned. And he has a very detailed memory of not making it to the stairs before collapsing. Now, obviously, that's not what happened, but he remembers it very thoroughly. He says that after he collapsed on the ground in the basement, in his mind, he kept hearing his own voice telling him that he was not going to die there, that he was going to make it. He said that it was like he was telling himself that he was going to be okay, that he was going to make it, and that he was going to get up, but it wasn't him. I know that sounds confusing, but it was like a third-party version of himself was yelling at him to wake up and get out. Then, he says that he jumped awake, but that's where things get really strange. He says that when he woke up, it was morning, and he was at his friend Derek's house. He says that he asked Derek how he got there, and Derek told him all about how he'd stayed over that night, how they'd been playing Call of Duty all night, and how they had pizza. He looked outside, and sure enough, his car was sitting in Derek's driveway. According to Derek, Derek's parents, and even my parents, he had been there all night. He wasn't home whenever the fire broke out, a fact that everyone was beyond grateful for. However, he completely and totally remembers being in the fire. And I remember some of what he actually said, that he was home when we had dinner, and I don't ever remember him leaving. He says that he was home. Everyone else says that he was out. And for me, there's just a huge blank in my memory for where he was or what happened to him. It's a crazy event that I cannot explain. But my brother sincerely believes that he died in that fire. He remembers the pain, the heat, but he was, by all official and known accounts, not home that night. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure if this is a glitch, but based on his recollection of the fire, and the fact that I can't remember where he was, it all seems like something went wrong here. Something about all of this really confuses me, and it makes me think how broken our simulation may actually be. This could be chalked up to me being in a state of shock, or it could be considered a glitch. I'll let you decide. For a little context, I'm a 44-year-old woman and I'm in a wheelchair. I've lived on my own, independently, since I was 19. In my 20s, I was a night owl, staying up all night and sleeping all day. One night in April of 2004, I made hamburger stew in my crock pot. After I ate, I put the leftover stew in a plastic container to put in the icebox. While doing so, the crock pot tipped over, spilling boiling hot stew all over my lap. As soon as it hit my legs, I had so many thoughts run through my head. First, I thought, okay, I'll go knock on a neighbor's door and ask for help. But it was 4 a.m, so that was a no-go. I was at a loss of what to do. Finally, I grabbed my cordless phone, went to my bedroom, took my pants off, and then called everyone that I could think of. Nobody answered their phones, so I popped a couple of over-the-counter painkillers and tried passing out, which didn't really work. So I just laid there trying to relax for the next 4 hours. Around 8 or 9, I tried my mom again, and this time she answered. I told her that I burned myself and that I needed her to come to get me to take me to the hospital. She then tells me that she would be there in a couple hours after she got some sleep. I wasn't in the mood to argue with her at that point, so I just said okay and hung up the phone. I finally ended up passing out of sheer exhaustion. I still didn't sleep very well because I was in so much pain. When my mother finally did show up and saw the severity of the burn, she apologized to me for not getting there sooner. She then scolded me for not calling 911. Honestly, I didn't even think to call 911. The weird thing, when I told her who all I tried calling, we called everyone that I told her I had called, and nobody had any record of me trying to call them. I'd called my mom, my dad, All my siblings, my grandpa, and my mom's friend, and not one person, including my mom, had any record of me trying to call them until 8 or 9 that morning, when I called my mom back. I remember so vividly calling all of those people. I still don't and will probably never understand how nobody had any record of me calling. Like I said, it could be a glitch, or I guess it could be shock, I don't know. It's still baffling regardless of whatever it is. And thank you for reading. Hey Raven, I've been meaning to send you these 3 little glitch stories. So, story number 1. A little background to start. I don't really like wearing rings. Even after I married my husband, I always took my wedding ring off when I went to sleep, and because it's super uncomfortable for me to sleep with rings on my fingers, especially since my hands have a tendency to swell at night. At home, I have a designated place for my rings when I take them off, but if I stay the night somewhere else, I usually just put them in whatever bag I may bring with me on an overnight stay somewhere. Now, onto the story. My cousin needed someone to watch her young boys for her because she had to work an overnight shift, and her husband had to get up early for work the next day, which meant that for 2 or 3 hours, there would be no one there for the kids. She asked me if I could come over and stay the night so that someone would be there for the boys, who were 2 and 5 years old at the time. As godmother to the boys, I of course said yes, even though I too had to work the next day, but not until much later. By the time I got there, the boys were in bed asleep anyways, and it has never been a big deal for me to help out with them if she needed help. My cousin was more like a sister to me anyways, thus the reason I was asked to be the godmother to both her kids. Anyway, on to the glitch. I was wearing both my wedding and engagement rings, and a necklace as well. I took all my jewelry off and placed them in the small pocket in the front part of the backpack that I had brought over with me. I'm sure that you know where this is going. I went to sleep that night. The next morning, after my cousin came home from work, I went home and got ready for work. After I bathed and got dressed, I opened the front pocket of my backpack to pull out my jewelry, and, you guessed it, they weren't there. At that point, I searched every pocket in the backpack. I even went as far as opening all of the pockets and turning the backpack upside down and shaking it. There was nothing. Not even the sound of rings and a metal pendant clanging against each other. I was baffled. I was sure that I put them in the backpack. I even called my cousin and asked her to keep a lookout for them at her house, just in case, by chance, I may have actually put them on her computer desk or something like that. I was tired after all when I got there, and I went to bed as soon as I arrived. But I knew that I had put them in my backpack. I was sure of it. I don't remember how long it was, but months, maybe even a year later, when my husband needed to borrow my backpack for a road trip that he was taking with a friend. I had used it a bunch of times in between when my jewelry went missing and when my husband needed to borrow it. I started to remove the things from the backpack so that he wasn't carrying around unnecessary items for his trip, and I bet you can't guess what I found. That's right, my necklace and rings in the same little pocket that I had put them in the night that I stayed over at my cousin's house. Now, story number 2. When my son was 2 years old, he loved Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. He liked it so much that my husband and I got him a 3-disc DVD set that had 26 episodes of the show on them. One day, I had turned my back for just a moment, and when I turned back around, I had found that my son had opened up the case to the DVDs and had pulled one of them out. I took it from him and looked at it. It was a little scratched up, but otherwise didn't look too bad. It still played just fine in our Xbox, so I never really worried about it. However, when we played them in the DVD player in our van, the one that was scratched up would skip once it reached a certain episode, and I would have to change out the disc. It played enough of those episodes on the disc that I didn't see not playing it for those episodes. It really wasn't a big deal. Well, one day my son was watching the disc in the van, and it was on the episode that skipped. At that point, we were almost home, so I just let the disc play instead of worrying about pulling it out and putting in a different one. Only this time the disc didn't skip. It played just fine. After we pulled into the driveway and I put the van into park, I pulled the disc out and looked at it. I was baffled. There were no scratches to be seen. Now, you may be thinking that maybe my husband just cleaned it. Trust me when I say that that was not possible. At that time, my husband rarely, if ever, drove the van, and he could really have cared less about if that DVD worked or not. And also, I had cleaned it several times with no luck of it making a difference. I even used a disc repair kit, and it also did not help. Besides, disc repair kits don't actually work as well as one would think. The disc never looked like new after the disc repair kit, but for whatever reason, it does now. It looks brand new. It's just too crazy. If it isn't a glitch in the Matrix, then I have no clue how it got fixed like new. Now, story number 3. This glitch is super recent. It happened over the summer. One weekend day, we were having a lazy day. I was playing my Nintendo Switch Lite and watching the TV in the living room. My husband was taking a nap. My son was playing our regular Nintendo Switch in his bedroom while he watched on his TV. Yes, my 7-year-old has his own TV and is spoiled rotten. To add a bit of background, my son has cerebral palsy. His whole right side is affected by it, and playing the Switch with the Joy-Cons attached to the handheld part of the Switch is hard for him. So, we have a few different regular controllers that make it much easier for him to play games on the Switch. Using the Joy-Cons in handheld mode is hard for him to use because the controls are too far apart, and he only has one working hand. With a regular controller, it's a much smaller space, so he is able to better play with one hand. And this is important to the story. Anyways, back to the glitch. My son walked into the living room holding a controller that had Pikachu from Pokemon on it. He put it down on the couch and came over to ask me a question. I answered his question, and then he walked away. I noticed that he had left the controller on the couch, but found that it was too late to call after him to let him know that he had left it. I knew that he would come back and get it, as he couldn't play without it. In the meantime, I went back to playing my Switch and watching, or really just listening to the TV. A couple moments later, my son was back asking about the controller. I turned and pointed to the spot on the couch where he had left it, only to find that it wasn't there. No, I didn't touch it. My husband was taking a nap, so he didn't touch it. It just wasn't there anymore. I got up and looked around, looked on the floor, picked up a blanket that was on the couch and shook it out, but it was gone. I was baffled. Instead of worrying about it because this stuff happens to me all the time, I just moved on. I got out another controller for my son and handed it to him, and told him to use that one. He obliged and was on his way. I went back to what I was doing, playing Animal Crossing on my Switch and watching the TV. About an hour later, I got up to go to the bathroom. My eyes immediately went to a spot on the couch where the Pikachu controller sat. I picked it up and put it away in the box where we keep all the stuff for the Switch. I just shook my head and moved on with life because this isn't out of the ordinary for me. But it still baffles me every time it happens. Tonight, I had my first real glitch experience, and I just don't know how to deal with it. My partner's son came over for dinner, and when he left, we walked him out to his car. I could see a car that I've never seen before sitting there and immediately said, "Where's your other car?" They both asked, "What car?" And I replied, "The black one. You know, the Dodge Ram?" Sitting there was a Nissan Patrol. It looks nothing like the car that I have seen parked outside every time he visits. My partner and his son both said, "No, this is the car he's had for a year, that he had to wait months for." I knew that he had to wait months for the car. We talked about it a lot, and when he finally got it, we were all really happy for him. But it's not the same car. I enjoy listening to the glitch stories, and I've empathized with the confusion people felt when everyone around them looks at them like they are mad, to the point where they say just drop it because they don't want to look like an idiot. And that's exactly what I did. I just dropped it. But the physical reaction of suddenly being in that situation took me by surprise. I felt a sudden wave of nausea, and I really had to hold it together. To be confronted by something you know is not right, but to have everyone tell you that what you know is not true was intense. I'm not a car person, so I could explain it away if it was a similar looking black car, but it wasn't even the same color. And I know that he had a car that was not common here. I'm in Australia. A Dodge Ram is unique. A Nissan Patrol isn't. I immediately rang my daughter, who is the only person in my family that would listen and not think that I had lost my marbles, and told her what happened. I'm glad I could do that because I knew no one else would take me seriously. I'm very shaken by this experience, and I'm not really sure what to do now. If I have switched realities, how many other things have changed? It's scary. This all happened in one evening in 2019. Not so much glitches, but profound coincidences. This is a long one, so please try to stay awake. 1. I played at an open mic and was invited to record one of my songs by a musician that we will call JD. I was very happy with the recording, and I wanted him to look into other musical issues. I purchased a portable digital recording studio years ago that I could never get working, and JD, being an excellent engineer and technician, was given the task. He was able to get it working, and we were able to hear what was recorded by the previous owner. The first track was a solo rap vocal track, and all you could hear him saying is red rum, M effing red rum, red rum. We kind of laughed at it for a moment, until we looked up at a poster that he had above his studio. It showed a caricature drawing of the actors in The Shining, and in balloon lettering was the word red rum. 2. Later that evening, I remembered that I brought JD a guitar pedal of which I had no use. It was great for shredding guitar leads, which he excels at, and I do not. As I handed him the unit, he says to hold on a minute, and he comes back with the box meant for the exact make and model pedal. He had sold his years before, but for some strange reason had held on to the box. Then, number 3. After that episode, we were discussing speakers and how I wanted to upgrade my PA system. I mentioned that I had an older system with custom brand speakers. Again, he left, and then returned with feedback screen inserts that were meant for my exact size speakers. He said that he meant to put them into the exact pair that he owned years prior, but sold them before he could install them. As an addendum, the people that he sold the pedal and the speakers to are now deceased. It makes me wonder if that rapper had a successful career or succumbed to having the same fate. I lived in Oklahoma after attending college for quite some time. I started going on cruises while I was in my early 20s as an inexpensive vacation, and would routinely, twice a year, drive from Tulsa to Houston for these vacations. Now, being young, male, and living in Oklahoma where adult video stores don't exist, I knew every store in Texas along Highway 75 and Interstate 45 along the entire route. About 10 years ago, I learned about the Mandela effect, or glitches in the Matrix, and something I read online said that it was easier to notice changes at the fringe of your life. In other words, changes that don't really affect you are seen easier. One adult store at exit 225 for most of my life was on the northwest side of the freeway street crossing. There was nothing else on that part of the interstate for several miles, and, as stated, I was a young male. Around 5 to 6 years ago, I noticed this store was no longer on the northwest corner. It was now on the southwest corner. Now, a store moving is not uncommon, but in its place were 3 houses that looked as if they were built in the late 70s or early 80s. The store could have never have been in that location based on the age of the houses. Unlike other stories I've heard, I wasn't freaked out or unnerved. I'd been watching for just such a change. This change piqued my interest, and I have watched that corner every time I go through the area. The next change occurred when it was time for me to move from Tulsa to Houston 4 years ago. The store moved again. The new location was on the southeast corner, and no building was on the southwest corner. It did not look as if any building had actually ever been there. To all the listeners, I suggest watching the fringe of your life. When big things happen, sometimes the small stuff just changes. I'm not sure how to classify this story. It could be a glitch or dimensional travel. I'm still not sure. It was in January of 2005, in Florida, that I found myself driving home from work in my minivan. If you're familiar with Florida roads around Cape Coral, then you will understand that there's not much to block your view from the roads. Visibility was about 10 miles on a clear and sunny evening. I could see that I was coming up to an intersection, doing about 45 miles per hour, and taking my foot off the gas to coast to the intersection, about a quarter of a mile ahead. That's when I noticed a black unmarked helicopter traveling south to north. It turned towards me, facing west, and I noticed a red light began flashing on the nose of the helicopter. The next thing I knew, I was headed on a crash course into the back end of a car about 50 feet ahead. I hit at almost full speed, as I only had a second to hit the brakes. Traveling a quarter of a mile in 2 seconds seems impossible, but it happened, and I remember getting a citation for it. It also seemed darker, or dusk, when before it was sunny. Having read similar stories that happened in 2005, it made me think that I, or everyone in this universe, had been transported into a parallel universe. Things just don't feel right. But I can't put into words just how it's different. So that was this week's collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. Some interesting, weird, glitchy stories. Anyways, a bunch of really strange stories where the Matrix falls apart, because that's what it does. It glitches out, it falls apart, and we all are just left here staring at the broken mess of our simulation, thinking, where'd my keys go? It's always the keys, or the cell phone. It's never mundane things like my cup of coffee. It's the keys I need to drive my car. Anyways, it's irrelevant what I'm saying. All of these were actually submitted directly to me this time around. None of these were from Reddit. So a huge thank you to all the people who submitted these stories. You guys are amazing. It's always nice whenever I can put one of these together just based on nothing but submissions, because it means I have some amazing people listening to the videos, willing to submit their story. So if you have a story, please do send it my way, astheravendreams.com. There's a big button that says submit your story. Just click that. And, yeah. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. I'm always accepting new subscribers. Let's see. There's super thanks, joining Patreon. You can do all that stuff. Never ever expected, always appreciated. And I think that's about it. I don't really have much else to say. Other than, of course, what you all are waiting for if you're listening to this point, the word of the week. Now, the word of the week is where I give you a word, you leave a comment with the word, your comment ends up on the screen, such as how they are right now and a few moments before now. And yeah, these fine people on the screen left me comments with their sentences containing the word of the week in some way, shape, or form. And each and every single one of them is an amazing person. A great person, a good friend of the channel's. Even if you don't leave a comment, you're still a great friend of the channel, because I love you all. You're all amazing people. Yeah. It's just these people went the extra step to leave a comment. And I understand that not everybody wants to do that, so don't ever feel pressured, please. Yeah. Moving on to this week's word of the week. This week, the word of the week is gradual, which is moving, changing, or developing by fine or often imperceptible degrees, and proceeding by steps or degrees. Gradual is basically movement that's slow. Movement in the literal and figurative sense, such as we are gradually getting through the alphabet on these words of the week, a second time, mind you. So, that's what gradual means. Use it in a sentence, get your sentence on the screen at the end of the next week's video. Yeah. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope you had a great weekend. And I hope, of course, I do see you on the next video. But until then, you're loved, you're valid, you're important, you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.